Commissioner Buller, good to see you. Today's announcement of $300,000 over 3 years doesn't seem like a lot of money to dedicate. What was your reaction to the announcement?
Well, hello, Dennis, and happy 2022. My reaction was, well, it's not a lot of money, very similar to your reaction. By my calculations, it's $117,000 per year, which really isn't a lot of money to develop a toolkit and get it out, test it, and then start distributing it.
As you mentioned, we're in 2022 here. It's been years now since the inquiry delivered the final report. How would you say the government's doing in implementing those recommendations?
Well, how much time do you have, Dennis? I'll be brief. I'm very disappointed, and I have a lot of company, both the family members of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and to us people, as well as the survivors. In fact, everyone who was involved in the national inquiry. Plus, we have hundreds of thousands of non-Indigenous allies who were expecting the government to simply do better. So I think it's disappointment all around.
How are the ongoing delays affecting the health of MMIWG families and their healing?
Well, they're very capable of speaking for themselves. And I don't want to detract from what they want to say to the public. But what I can say is overall I've heard it's causing them even more frustration, even more grief, even more pain.
We're also seeing more and more cases. This isn't something that has come to an end. You put out a lot of calls for justice, but are there key priorities that you would have hoped that the government would have moved on by now?
Well, I'll talk about the federal government in particular,
right.
But our calls for justice were aimed at all governments, including Indigenous governments. So having said that, with respect to the federal government, they certainly could have and should have moved on the ombudsperson and the Indigenous Rights Tribunal. They could have moved on the Deputy Commissioner for Indigenous Matters in Corrections. They could have started an annual report, as we called for, so that they're updating the public, the Canadian public, and internationally too, on the progress, if any, that they're making. And there were calls for more funding for victims. There were calls for public education. These are simple tasks, relatively speaking, and I'm very disappointed that the government hasn't shown us the results of their, and I use air quotes, hard work in developing action plans for the cause for justice.
Commissioner, we'll be coming up on another anniversary here of the release of the report in a couple of months' time. We've blamed things like the pandemic and elections, but are you hopeful that we might see something here soon on the action plan from the federal government?
Dennis, I'm always hopeful because there's a tremendous amount of political will gathering now to push the government ahead. And we know the government responds to political will. The government responds to whether they're going to be reelected or not, or whether they're going to be sitting on the opposition side of the chamber. So, there's a lot of discontent coming from people who vote. And that's when the government will start to pay attention.
We're seeing that on a few different Indigenous issues. Commissioner Buller, we'll have to leave it there, but do appreciate you taking some time for us. Good to see you.
Very happy. Thank you so much, and Happy New Year.